and for being here. Like Todd said, my name is Priscilla and I'll be your workshop facilitator. I am a local herbalist and gardener and beginner farmer. For my business, I obviously teach workshops. I teach workshops also at two different Providence libraries and a couple of other organizations. I make tea blends, sea moss, and skincare products like infused oils and salves and things like that. But what I've been doing the most now and really passionate about is teaching workshops. Is an opportunity to share what I know and also to learn from you all that may have many more years growing than I have. I've been working as a gardener for about 3 seasons. This year I took a little bit of a break due to growing a different thing, growing a baby. This year was my first year with my own plot. I started it at Bami Farm, which is in Johnston, and it's part of the African Alliance. It's a great organization to check out if you're interested in beginner plots and things like that. My plot I got for free for the first year, and I got a good amount of space. So if land is an obstacle or space, you know, there's definitely a lot of different farms, and you could talk to me about that later on. So I started the season there. I set up the mounds and everything, but I do have a farming partner who kind of took over the day-to-day, so I can just enjoy being pregnant. So today, like Todd said, we're gonna talk about pruning and some herbs and how to grow them at home and just some of the benefits. We'll take a walk through the beautiful community garden that they have here. I believe it's split up with, for the community in the front, and then in the back, it's private plots that folks rent out and grow their own crops there. And then we'll walk through, and they have an edible forest with like elderberries and pawpaws, and I'll do a pruning demonstration there. For this workshop, I wanted to focus on pruning like shrubs and trees because these are things that you may have at home, and you know, to just give you some tips and tricks and some of the tools that you can use to take care of these things and make sure that your plant doesn't get any disease or harmed if not pruned correctly. You should all have a little packet, and we won't read everything verbatim, but it's just good to take home. At the back of the packet, on the last page, I placed 2 QR codes. One of them is to get a digital version of this. If you're like me, you're gonna lose this by the end of the day. But if you scan this, you can go to a Google Drive where you actually be able to see all the other workshops that I teach, but you'll be able to download like a PDF version that you can save on your phone. And the other QR code you can scan, it'll bring you to like my social, how to get in contact with me, if you want any follow-up information or just stay in touch and be friends. So I'll go over just a little bit. So pruning is a process of removing branches and cutting down trees, cutting flowers, things like that. And you do them for different various reasons. It could be as simple as aesthetic enjoyment, to prune a plant to a shape that you like it, to a size that you like. For safety, right? So if you're pruning a branch that may be decaying or broken and it is in harm's way. So for safety, for view enhancement, for privacy, right? So you can prune something to shape and grow into an area where it would block your view or people's view into your area. And the last thing is like fruit management. So you can prune to promote more fruiting or flowering, or you can prune to decrease that, depending what your goal is. I've also listed the different types of pruning, and I'm like a visual person, so I try to add as many images there so you all can see. And depending what we find in the edible, I'll either do like a reduction cut or like a branch removal to just show how to properly do that, and also to do it in a way that looks like aesthetically pleasing, so you don't have any nubs or anything taken showing like badly. I also added a list of like some of the basic tools if you're like really beginner and not sure what to get. You know, gardening tools can seem overwhelming, but if you have the basics, like this is what I consider like snips. This is just a little sharper than your scissors, or it could be like a gardening scissors. This is good for pruning herbs and things that are delicate. Your go-to are gonna be hand pruners like this, which you could still use for like delicate things, but this blade is definitely stronger. So if you have thicker, woodier things to prune or branches, will do the job really well. And the last thing I like to have is a folding saw. Most folks are not gonna have a bow saw at home, but most folks could have a folding saw like this that does a lot, and you can cut through just what a bow saw does. Just a little bit more time and effort and elbow grease, but having a folding saw like this can solve a lot of issues for you. It's nice to have, and it folds so it's not dangerous. You can put it away. So those are what I would say great beginner tools to have. You can even just do the hand pruners and the folding saw, and you know, if you have a lot of herbs, then you could get snips, but that's more preferential. Obviously, I listed a pictures of other tools that that you can use depending on what your goals are and your plans are for your garden. And then the other section of the workshop is more information for you all about different herbs that you can grow at home. And what I put here is like the top most popular ones, and kind of what you need at home to start off. I put this image, right? You can do basic growing like in a pot with soil, or you can also do like a hydroponic system, right? So you don't have to deal with soil or anything like that. Growing in water, as long as you have adequate lighting, which can assist you by buying like grow lights. Things like that are super accessible now, but will help you in the long run. Once we get in the garden, I'll talk more specifically about pruning for herbs, and like there's two different ways to prune depending on the plant and the benefits of it. So if there aren't any questions, we can start going and walking through the garden. Okay, so if everybody's ready, we can walk through the garden, and as we talk and you see anything that you like to take a little cutting, feel free. We got the okay from the botanical garden that we can take cuttings from the front of the garden, so you all can, you know, repot them and start your little gardens at home. Herbs, so the garden has a few different things. There's peppermint in there, lemon balm, they have raspberries. So there's a few different things in the garden along with like the vegetables that they're growing. And we'll point things out and learn together. And if we have Google, we have our phones, so if we can't remember the name of anything. This definitely is an experience where I want folks like to feel free to touch and grab, and you know, like just it's great to, and I say always communicate with plants in that way. they like to be touched and tend to. So as you can see, they're growing a bunch of different tomatoes in here. These are some type of potato, sweet potato, and if you really look, they're all in containers, which is the best way to grow potatoes. They have a bunch of them where it looks like it's just like a little patch, but they're really in containers. Yeah, so these are the flowers from the sweet potato.
Now, if you wanted to grow a sweet potato at home, would take a sweet potato and just like
Yes.
put it in water?
No, you would wait for them to get those little eyes,
Okay.
and then you can cut up a potato, and as long as you're planting it that has an eye faced up, like one potato can give you 4 eyes, and then you can plant that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. How long would it take to like yield a potato?
I would say a whole season. Potatoes take a little longer. Yeah.
90 days or so?
Oh, a little longer than that. I would say like a full season. They probably planted this at the beginning, and like I said, because it's a root, right? A tuber.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not, you're not harvesting any of this unless you want to cut some flowers for yourself. So you have to wait for all of this to die back, which is going to take the whole look. We're in October and they look like they're thriving. So you have to wait for it to die back. I would say November. No, there wouldn't be. So he asked a question. Under the containers, will there be, like if the roots go out, if there's holes? And they shouldn't be any holes because you want to contain everything in there. So I was explaining to her, when you plant potatoes, sweet potatoes, you plant a piece that has like an eye coming out. That's what we call it. I don't know if there's a specific term from it, but there's a little eye. And you just plant it in, and everything stays contained, right, Todd? Like you wouldn't make any holes in the bottom. Yep, some drainage, but not necessarily big enough for roots to escape. Yeah, yeah.
No holes on the side, but just holes in the bottom.
Yeah, small ones.
Okay.
Because it's more for drainage than anything else. Yeah. All right, we're gonna keep walking this way. So I wanted to point out this plant. This is nasturtium. This is a great edible plant. It has medicinal qualities as well. They asked me that last week and I had to Google it because I wasn't sure. I just knew it was edible, but it does have some medicinal aspect. It's anti-inflammatory. This is great to plant as a companion with the things that you're growing because they deter pests naturally. So it's good to plant with eggplants, squashes, things like that. And they're beautiful. As you can see, the flowers are beautiful. They're edible. And like I said, they have their own like medicinal properties to them. So this is one that I suggest to always plant in your garden. Usually in the corners, so they act like a little perimeter shield. And like I said, they're just beautiful. I always tell folks, like in your veggie gardens, it should also be flowers because you want to attract pollinators, and it just looks natural.
Now, when you say they deter pests, do you mean like insects or
Yes.
like rodents?
No, like insects. I looked it up earlier. Let me see exactly. I think it's like aphids that they deter. You can Google online. I may have a worksheet from actually when I did this program that I got like a good companion list I can share out. But online you can research the benefits of planting nasturtiums. So nasturtiums repel white flies, squash bugs, aphids, several different beetles, and cabbage, loopers. So, yeah. So that's really good for that. And some of the medicinal, because this was new information for me as well. So this helps a lot with your respiratory system. So reduces mucus, phlegm, is antibacterial, antifungal. So I love a plant that has multiple uses and it's beautiful and you can just eat it. The one thing with farming and gardening that I would say every season is different depending just the temperature, how much it rains, how dry it is, how hot it is. Like we're in October now and you can see a lot of like the sweet potatoes and potatoes over there were a great example. The greens haven't even started to die back on that yet. So it just depends on the weather and the temperature of that season. But I do think, like my personal view is that there is a big change going on globally. I can't say anything specifically as to why each plant is acting the way they are, but this is like really a community garden in the sense that they kind of let things just be and do their own thing. Yeah. So lavender is a little woodier.
Yeah.
So it may be trickier. I've never tried to propagate from a cutting, but the smaller the cutting, wants to borrow this to cut things. This is lavender. All right, I'm gonna walk to where the herbs are. All right, so right here there's peppermint. Peppermint is a prolific grower. It's a plant that I recommend growing in a pot, because if not, your whole backyard will be peppermint.
Yeah, it'll take over.
Yeah, it takes over. With one little peppermint plant, you can have really big yield if you continue to trim it, which I'll talk about more towards the end.
Oh, sure.
So,
You have bee in my house.
so the more like an herb plant, the more that you prune it, the more that you utilize it, the bushier the plant will become, and more leaves that it's gonna give you. When you're growing herbs to utilize the leaves, you want to prune it often, and you'll see that in your packet as well. Like, you want to prune it often because it prevents it from going to the flowering stage. 'Cause so once it gets to the flowering stage, the plant is like, I'm done. I went through my whole reproductive cycle, now have my seeds, and I'm finished. So if you want to grow, especially if it's indoor during the winter, continue to cut it. Don't let it go to seed. That way you can harvest more and more of the leaves. Also, when you're thinking about this, like if you like peppermint tea and use it like medicinally, peppermint is really good for your digestive system. Once the plant has gone to the flowering stage, like all the energy is going to make that flower. So it loses some of like the medicinal potency in the leaves. So it's also great to like harvest the smallest leaves are the ones that are filled, if you want to pass that down.
Smallest leaves are the most potent.
The most potent, yeah.
And how would you steep this for tea? Like, do you just dice it up and put it in?
So with fresh peppermint, you can steep it just like that. You could also dry it out and then have, dried peppermint all year long, which is like my go-to. I like to dry all my herbs just so I can conserve them. But it is nice to have fresh peppermint, make some cocktails and things like that. But yeah, peppermint is a plant that dries really easily. So you can kind of leave it out as long as it has nice air circulation. It will dry fairly quickly. You never want to dry anything like too much on top of each other, because then that traps moisture and mold. I want to walk more over there to show some other herbs. As you can see, there's peppermint growing all over. This is lavender. See, look at the little flowers. Some people mistake it with rosemary. Yeah, that's the same. It's just different leaves. The leaves are different because they're smaller. But smell it. Feel free to eat stuff like peppermint. Yep. Peppermint is super tasty.
In the winter, after he has the seeds, in what specific month do you start growing? Like, you put the seeds down so it can flourish and keep growing?
So it depends if you start indoors or straight on the ground. If you're gonna go straight in the ground, you have to wait for the last frost date.
Frost date.
Yeah.
What time?
It's a little different year to year. I mean, everything.
Usualmente.
May, yeah. So if you're starting in the ground, you're gonna start a little later on, May.
Afuera tu casa.
It all depends, right? Like I mentioned, with the temperament every year. But you wanna wait to the last frost date. And that's information that you can easily find online. You could just Google like last frost date and it'll give you an estimate. If you want to start seeds sooner than that, like indoors, you can start in March, April, as long as you have like lighting and just a location to put it. This year I got like an indoor greenhouse that cost me $20 from Blck. Blck has amazing gardening supplies. So if you want to start your seeds and kind of have little seedlings ready for when May comes, you can start in March. I started in March. I set up my little indoor greenhouse. I bought trays and I just threw seeds in those trays. Then I took saran wrap and I covered the trays with saran wrap to keep the moisture in. I ordered like grow lights from Amazon that cost me $15 for like a pack of 5 different ones. And it was a great little setup. Yeah. And last year, I remember when I was working on my clients' properties, it was a really tough year for hydrangeas. I didn't do any gardening on other people's properties this year, so I'm not sure. But I know like last year was hard. Most people, it was a good year. That's good.
Also because it's so much rain. They love rain.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Mine didn't flower.
so when I put last year, right? Last year was horrible for hydrangeas. Yeah. So again, like I was saying, it all depends on which hydrangea you have. Some bloom on new wood, some bloom on old wood. When I was getting information and putting this together, so right, like enhanced flowering on plants that flower on last year growth, like hydrangeas, you prune right after they bloom. So once they're done blooming, you can prune them back. Okay, so right here. If you have the old wood, so I just want, in case other people have hydrangeas. So the question that I received was, they don't have any hydrangeas here, but if you have hydrangeas at home, when to prune? So there's 2 different types of hydrangeas. Some of them bloom, like they flower on their old wood. Some of them flower on the new wood. For the ones that flower on old wood, you want to prune after the flowers fade. The big leaf and the mountain hydrangeas are the example that they have. And if they grow on new wood, you prune in late winter, early spring, which they have here smooth hydrangeas. The lace cap ones, I think so. Yeah.
That's what I do. I prune them, in the
Hydrangea paniculata, right? The one that you have, prune back stems just to above a fat bud. In fall, late winter, or spring. So hydrangeas, I think you can like take a whole course and still, it's so many different ones. The smooth hydrangeas, it says let these plants grow a season or 2 before pruning. Once the shrub is established, prune in the spring, which that's what we've done. So when it comes to hydrangeas,
I'm just gonna play it safe and not touch them at all until they flower. And then the ones that look like
you can look at the stem, right? Like the woodier part to see what has buds. You definitely don't want to cut anything that you see with budding.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and the harder wood ones we can prune. I personally like tree hydrangeas because they're just a little easier to prune. But again, in the 3 years that I spent gardening, I haven't had a full grasp of hydrangeas. It takes a little bit just because they're, they have different growth. Yeah, they're very temperamental. And people love their hydrangeas. Yeah. So I stopped here because I wanted to talk about, okay, yeah, sure.
So they want to know what's the use of this hydrangea.
So this is not hydrangea, this is mugwort. So I'm gonna talk about mugwort real quick. So this big patch that you see is mugwort. The way to identify it is like you see the leaf growth, but they have a silvery back. So in the back is silvery. Pregnant women shouldn't really touch or deal with mugwort because it's like induces your menstrual cycle to start. So it's useful in that way. It is also works for your respiratory system and things like that, but it's a proliferant grow. It's an invasive plant, so you'll see it growing everywhere. This is a plant that is great to harvest in locations like this where you know there's not a lot of traffic, in wooded areas, anywhere you see it, there's not a lot of foot traffic. But this is a great herb to drink as a tea. You can smoke it if you look for other like herbs to smoke are alternative, and because it just grows everywhere. If you see it in your garden, pull it out as best as you can because it will take over everything. And that's the real reason I point it out, because it's a nuisance more than anything else. But if you are pulling it up, there are beneficial uses of it. It's not just a plant that you can throw away. Yeah. You know, so there are different uses, but I mainly point it out so people learn the plant and take it out of their gardens, because you don't want it in your garden. Yeah.
Better in a container.
Yeah. And if you want to harvest it to use it medicinally, you want to get the smaller plants, because the ones with the flowers, like I mentioned, a lot of the energy has gone up to the flowers. As you can see, the leaves are very, very small. They're not going to have that much medicinal potency. But the smaller leaves, if somebody wants to take a cutting, just because I can't really touch the plant too much. You want to cut some? Yeah. Oh, you got some? Okay. There's a lot of free apps. Or even your phone does it. If you have an iPhone, you could take a picture of a plant and it'll give you the name, and you know, it's a good way to learn. That's how I've learned. I'm still learning. The picture this app, yeah. So this is an aster. And it is native in the sense it's part of North America. Let me see if I get more. Spanish needles is another name. Yeah, it's in the aster family. I don't know if there's any medicinal properties for it, but it is a beautiful plant. I figured the flowers would be nice when they were flowering. It's an aster. Okay, so we can keep walking. This is more of the mugwort right there. Raspberry leaf has a lot of medicinal properties as well. I just don't know if the species that they have planted here has those medicinal properties, or if it's more a ornamental, not ornamental because obviously it's fruiting, but it may or may not have that. But raspberry leaf is really good for the woman's reproductive system. The fruit I've never had the pleasure of eating, but it's like a custardy apple, what I heard. And last week when we had the workshop, somebody asked how long it takes. So it takes a little bit. It takes like 5-7 years for you to get some fruit. But I think it's an important tree to have and to acknowledge, because it is a native fruiting tree. And like I said, it was really important to the indigenous people as a food staple. And the leaves are very tropical-ish.
Cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I've only seen little ones. These are the biggest that I've seen. And I've never had the pleasure of eating the fruit. There's hazelnut trees in here. It's great because in here, mostly everything is labeled. So that helps me, that helps you, that helps all of us. Yeah, this is all public. You can come here and check it out. I mean, as you can see, there's no gates in this area. So yeah, and even like the indoor botanical garden, like a lot of time is free. I've only, like the times that I've gone to pay, it's been like just $3. Yeah. It's a beautiful place to check out, especially in the winter when everything is dead. In there, it's like you're going to the tropics. It's super nice in there. No, it's never too late to prune anything. It's never too late to prune anything. The only thing that I would say is with the plant or tree, shrub that has never been pruned, you may have to do a harder prune back than something that you have maintenance on it. So if you're okay with that, you could do that. What I would suggest is starting with anything that's broken or diseased, or any branching that are growing inside or crossing. So I'm gonna use this service cherry tree as an example. So when you're looking to prune, if you have any branches that are broken, decayed, or diseased, you can prune that at any time of the year because you want to take that away. For the most part, you want to prune late fall, early winter, or early spring. You want to prune when the tree is dormant and it's not having much activity. So by springtime, it's kind of cleaned up and it has energy to put out more branches, more leaves, more fruit, anything like that. But anything that is, broken, like I said, you can cut at any point, especially if it's in a place where it could, cause damage or injure somebody. As I talked about before, there's different types of pruning depending on your overall goal and what you want. I love to prune because it's an opportunity to also be like visually, like aesthetic, prune the tree the way you want it to. I think that when it comes to pruning, starting off slow and steady is a better option because you may not need to cut back as much as you think that you do. If we use this branch right here, for example, let's say this was part of the pathway. It's clearly covering the pathway, so we want to prune it back so folks can walk by. Your first inclination may be, I'm just gonna cut it all the way back. So if I were to cut it here, this will be considered a removal pruning, right? Because you're removing this whole branch. That wouldn't necessarily do anything to the tree. The tree is still going to be completely fine, but it's up to your liking. But if you start with reduction cuts, which is what it means, reducing it back to certain nodes or points, you may not need to cut the whole thing back. It all depends. So we're going to use this as an example so you all can kind of get a visual idea. So when you prune or you do like a reduction, like I mentioned, you want to prune back to another branch. You wouldn't want to prune here because when you do that, you're just leaving a stub. Granted, this doesn't do anything to harm the plant. If there's enough energy going to this branch, it's just gonna continue to branch out, but I think it looks ugly. I don't like any, what I call, eyes looking back at me. So I would go back to this node here or this fork. And you wanna prune with leaving a little bit behind because woodier plants, trees have what it call like a collar, and you don't want to injure that. Your prunes, your cuts, you want them to be like concise like that. You don't want any tearing or shredding because that may introduce disease into the plant. So this is okay, right? And then we can see now that this branch is kind of in the way and I don't really like it. So you can do a reduction cut. And I'm gonna go all the way back with this one because I already know.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
I see that you're cutting. I was always used to cutting a little bit on an angle.
Yeah, you can cut on an angle. The way the tree grows, the way it is, I know that no rain is gonna come. The reason why you cut it at an angle is so when it rains, the water just goes through. If you have a stump that's like a branch that's directly up or a stump, if you cut it completely flat, the rain is just gonna sit on it and it can introduce disease. I'll angle it for you.
No, I just was wondering if there
But I know here, that's the reason. That's the main reason you want to cut at an angle. But the way these are like positioned, I know that the rain will wash down anyways. But that's the reason why you cut at an angle, because it just allows for the water to flow. And when you cut at an angle too, especially for like plants that have like buds, you want to cut at an angle away from the bud. So if the bud's on the right side, you want to cut at an angle where it's going to the left, so that water is not rushing down on that bud. Yeah, so it's like away from there. Yeah. So the more I'm cutting this branch, the more I'm realizing that I just want to remove the whole thing because I can't walk. So you can continue to cut it smaller, but I'm just gonna go back to the base and just cut that whole branch because it's not gonna do anything to the tree and it's gonna give me the aesthetic look that I was looking for, and again, the accessibility to be able to walk through. And it's a great opportunity to show how nicely the folding saw works. Because I could possibly cut it with this, but it may be a little bit, yeah, too much. Can I give you this for a second? Oh, wrong tool. So you want to go down to the base, but you don't want to cut too close to the main branch, and you want to leave that tree collar healthy. And when you cut, you don't want to pull. You don't want to. You want to just do a straight cut through because any tears can damage the plant. So if it's easier to start a little higher, you can start a little higher, and then you can cut some more. So that's a nice cut. And you see, like this, you know, that was very, like, it's like butter. See what happened there? If you have a situation like that, you don't want to pull that. You just want to go from the bottom and get it so you don't tear it. Because tearing that branch, that bark back may just introduce disease and pests and things like that. So if we want to continue with this little pruning.
See how that's coming out the ground, the one you just touched? Would you just rip it down?
This?
No, over.
Which one?
This one right here.
Yeah, that. What would you do with that?
So that's exactly what I'm gonna get to because right, my goal, right, was to make this walkway accessible. So I'm gonna cut these out of my way just because they're in the way. So now that I'm seeing that this is in the way, I can either cut back to here, but since there's no leaves or anything growing, I'm gonna cut this all the way back to that the tree, right? Because there's no leaves, there's nothing growing. The same thing with this, so we can just clean up this area. And like I mentioned, you want to trim back anything that's crossing or growing into the plant and just doesn't give it like aeration. You want to cut back. So this, I'm cutting back to the ground. Plants they do like to get pruned. It's like, it introduces new growth, it cleans it up, you know, it's like, you don't feel great after a haircut, like you're shedding the old, but yeah, they do need it most of the time. Yeah, you don't, and if you maintain and you prune like once a year, like you don't have to do heavy pruning. You know, with your apple tree that you haven't pruned, you may have to cut back more than you anticipated just to clean it up. But then after that, it's not as heavier pruning that you have to do. Yeah. I haven't had the pleasure of dealing with a lot of like apple trees. I had a client that had like 40 blueberry bushes, so I have more experience pruning that. But they tried to forcibly prune a blueberry bush into a shape that it didn't like. So when we had to go clean it up, we pruned it almost back to the ground. So that's a hard prune, right? So now they have to wait for it to grow. But doing that, it kind of hits the reset button. So now when it grows, it's going to grow like more organically. It's not going to grow into, they were trying to force it into like a shape. And most fruiting trees don't want to be shaped like that. Yeah. Early fall, when it's not, like when it's done fruiting. Okay. So now that I pruned back everything, you can see like visually how much cleaner it looks. Um, it hits my goal of wanting to create a pathway. Oh, my hair is coming down. A pathway. And if you take a step back and look, it looks like I didn't even do anything, right? Everything looks like natural, which is what you want. One of my bosses told me that the biggest compliment you can receive after pruning is it looks like you didn't do anything. Because it looks really natural. Nothing is forced. Nothing is sticking out. The more I look around, the more I want to cut, because this branch doesn't have any leaves. So to me, it's not doing anything for anybody. And again, right, pruning is not just about safety or fruiting. It could be about aesthetics and looks. So if you want to remove a couple of those like straggly branches so you can create more like a top canopy, you could do that. But this was quick. It doesn't look like I did anything, which means everything still looks really natural. And now I have my pathway.